The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of my parents' Beacon Hill townhouse, and I watched the Dom Perignon seep into the Persian rug like blood from a fresh wound. My mother didn't even flinch. She just stood there in her Chanel suit, looking at me like I'd announced I was joining a cult instead of marrying the man I loved. A plumber, Emma. A goddamn plumber. Her voice dripped with the kind of disgust most people reserve for finding cockroaches in their kitchen. Do you have any idea what the Ashfords will say? What everyone at the club will whisper behind our backs? I squared my shoulders, my engagement ring catching the light from the crystal chandelier overhead. The ring wasn't a 3-carat diamond from Tiffany's like my sister Victoria's had been. It was a simple sapphire that Jake had saved 6 months to buy, and it meant more to me than all the blood diamonds in my mother's collection. I don't give a damn what anyone says, Mother. I love him. My father finally looked up from his Wall Street Journal, his reading glasses perched on his nose like a judge about to deliver a sentence. Love. He said the word like it was something distasteful he'd stepped in. You're throwing away everything we've built for you. Harvard Law wasn't cheap, Emma. The connections we've made, the doors we've opened. Senator Crawford's son has been asking about you. Senator Crawford's son is a coke-addicted trust fund baby who's been to rehab 4 times, I shot back. But sure, Dad, he'd make a much better husband than a man who actually works for a living. Victoria emerged from the sitting room, martini in hand, her perfectly highlighted hair swept into a chignon that probably cost more than Jake made in a week. My older sister had always been the golden child, the one who'd married the hedge fund manager and produced 2 picture-perfect grandchildren who attended the right preschool and would eventually go to the right boarding schools. Oh, Emma's still on about her little plumber? That's adorable. What are you going to do, live in some cramped apartment in Dorchester? Have your wedding at a VFW hall? We're having our wedding at the Botanical Gardens, actually. It's going to be beautiful. How quaint. Victoria took a long sip of her martini. I'm sure the guys from Jake's crew will look so dashing in their rented tuxedos. Will they come straight from unclogging toilets, or will they have time to shower first? The rage that had been building in my chest finally exploded. You know what, Vic? At least Jake's friends are real. They don't smile to your face while texting your husband's mistress behind your back. Yeah, I know about Bradley and his late nights at the office. Everyone knows, except you, apparently. Victoria's face went white, then red. The martini glass trembled in her hand. You little bitch. Girls, that's enough. My mother's voice could freeze lava. Emma, if you insist on this ridiculous marriage, don't expect us to be there. We won't be complicit in your social suicide. I looked at all 3 of them. These people who'd raised me in their world of country clubs and charity galas and endless, suffocating expectations. My father, who'd never asked me what I wanted, only what would look best on the family resume. My mother, who measured success in carats and square footage. My sister, who'd sold her soul for a McMansion in Wellesley and still ended up with a cheating husband. Fine, don't come. Jake and I will be just fine without you. You'll be back, my father said, returning to his newspaper. When the novelty wears off and you're living paycheck to paycheck, you'll come crawling back, and we might not be so forgiving. I walked out of that house knowing I'd never set foot in it again. Not as their daughter, not as someone who needed their approval or their money or their toxic conditional love. Jake was waiting in his truck outside, engine running. He took one look at my face and pulled me into his arms. He smelled like honest work and Old Spice, and I'd never felt safer. That bad, huh? Worse. I buckled my seatbelt, watching my childhood home disappear in the side mirror. They're not coming to the wedding. My mother said she won't be complicit in my social suicide. Victoria said you and your crew probably smell like sewage. Jake's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on the road. And your dad? Told me I'd come crawling back when I was broke and miserable. I reached over and took his hand.
I won't, by the way, crawl back. Even if we end up eating ramen every night and living in a studio, I'd rather have that with you than their whole goddamn empire. He squeezed my hand. You sure about this, Em? I know what you're giving up. The trust fund, the connections, all of it. I'm not giving up anything that matters. I meant it. Every word. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of wedding planning on a budget that would have made my mother faint. Instead of a wedding planner who charged $5,000 just for the initial consultation, I had my best friend Maya, who worked at a nonprofit and knew how to stretch a dollar until it screamed. Instead of a designer gown, I found a vintage dress at a consignment shop in Cambridge that fit like it was made for me. Instead of a string quartet, we'd have Jake's cousin's band, who usually played at Irish pubs, but cleaned up nice. The venue was the only splurge, and even that was reasonable compared to the places Victoria had looked at. The botanical gardens in the spring were magic, all cherry blossoms and wisteria, and the rental fee included tables and chairs. Jake's crew had volunteered to help set up, which my family would have seen as tacky, but I saw as the kind of love you can't buy.
I didn't tell anyone, but I cried the night I addressed my parents' invitation. My hand shook as I wrote out their names in calligraphy I'd taught myself from YouTube videos. I knew they wouldn't come, but I sent it anyway, along with Victoria's and my handful of aunts and uncles and cousins who'd all been CC'd on the family drama via my mother's concerned email blast about my unfortunate choices. The RSVPs came back. Every single Ashford except my grandmother declined. Most didn't even bother with an excuse. Victoria said simply, "unable to attend," in her assistant's handwriting. My grandmother's response came in the mail 3 days later, written in her shaky cursive on cream cardstock. "I'll be there, sweetheart. Wear something blue for me. Love, Nana." I sobbed in Jake's arms that night, and he held me while I ugly cried into his Bruins t-shirt. "At least someone's coming," he murmured into my hair. "And hey, my family's big enough for both of us. Ma's already calling you her daughter." He wasn't wrong. Jake's mother, Marie, had welcomed me like I'd always been part of the family. Sunday dinners at their modest house in Somerville were loud and chaotic, with Jake's 3 brothers and their wives and kids all crammed around a table that was too small, passing dishes and talking over each other and laughing so hard that wine came out of noses. It was nothing like the silent, formal dinners at my parents' house where conversation was a minefield and the wrong opinion could get you frozen out for weeks. The week before the wedding, I was in our apartment, a tiny one-bedroom in Jamaica Plain that was about the size of my childhood closet, when someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find a man in a suit holding a manila envelope. "Emma Ashford?" "That's me. You've been served." He handed me the envelope and walked away. I stood in the doorway staring at the thing like it might explode. Jake came up behind me, still in his work clothes, grease under his fingernails. "What is it?" I opened it with shaking hands. It was a letter from my father's attorney. A very official, very legal letter informing me that if I proceeded with this marriage, I would be formally removed from the family trust, all emergency credit cards would be canceled, and I would be financially disowned from the Ashford estate. There was also a form, pre-filled out, that would allow me to change my surname legally so I would no longer carry the Ashford name into disrepute. "Jesus Christ," Jake breathed, reading over my shoulder. "They're really doing this." I should have been devastated. I should have been terrified. Instead, I started laughing. Not the poetic laugh I'd been taught at finishing school, but a real from-the-gut laugh that bordered on hysterical. They think this is going to stop me? They think I give a single fuck about their money? No, it's hilarious. They're so goddamn out of touch. They think threatening to take away my trust fund is the nuclear option. Like I was sitting here planning our life around money I never asked for. I crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. Fuck them. Fuck all of them. Jake pulled me close. "You're amazing. You know that?" I'm pissed off is what I am. But I was smiling. Let's go get married and live our best goddamn life just to spite them. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep.
I kept thinking about walking down that aisle alone, no father to give me away, no mother crying proud tears in the front row, no sister standing up as my maid of honor. Maya would be there, of course, and Jake's family would fill half the garden, but my side would be empty except for my 84-year-old grandmother in her wheelchair. I got up and went to the window, looking out at the Boston skyline. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably sleeping soundly in their California king bed with their Egyptian cotton sheets, completely unbothered by the fact that they were missing their daughter's wedding. Victoria was probably planning brunch with her equally vapid friends, making jokes about poor Emma and her blue-collar boy. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard about the wedding. Sorry your family sucks. If you need someone to walk you down the aisle, I'm in town. Marcus. Marcus Chen. I hadn't thought about him in years. He had been my study partner at Harvard, the guy who'd helped me survive constitutional law and had maybe been a little bit in love with me, though we'd never acted on it. He'd gone on to clerk for a Supreme Court justice and was probably making partner at some white shoe law firm by now. I texted back. How did you get this number? Called in a favor. Is the offer too weird? I can back off. It's not weird. It's really nice, actually. But I think I need to do this part myself. Understood. Congratulations, Em. He's lucky. I stared at that message for a long time. Marcus represented everything my parents wanted for me. The right schools, the right career, the right pedigree. And he was a good guy, genuinely kind. In another life, maybe I could have loved him, but I didn't. I loved Jake, with his rough hands and his easy laugh, and the way he fixed things without making a big deal about it. The morning of the wedding, I woke up to the sun streaming through our bedroom window and Jake already gone. He'd spent the night at his brother's place, observing the don't see the bride before the ceremony tradition that I hadn't expected from him. There was a note on his pillow. Can't wait to marry you, beautiful. See you at the altar. Maya showed up at 9 with coffee and bagels and a determination to make me the most beautiful bride Boston had ever seen. Budget be damned. She did my makeup in our tiny bathroom, while her girlfriend Sophie worked on my hair, twisting it into an elegant updo that probably looked better than anything my mother's hairdresser could have done. The dress fit perfectly. The vintage lace hugged my curves, and the tea-length skirt was exactly the kind of classic, timeless style I had always loved. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy in a way I'd never seen in any of the photos from Victoria's wedding, where I'd been stuffed into an ugly bridesmaid dress and forced to smile for pictures with people I didn't like. You look incredible, Maya said, her eyes welling up. Jake's gonna lose his shit when he sees you. Language, I teased, but I was crying too. Thank you for this, for everything. Girl, please, you've been there for me through every disaster of my 20s. This is the least I can do. She handed me a tissue. Don't mess up the mascara I just spent 20 minutes on. We arrived at the Botanical Gardens at 2, an hour before the ceremony. The setup was more beautiful than I had dared to hope. White chairs arranged in neat rows, an arch covered in flowers that Jake's crew had built and decorated, fairy lights strung through the trees even though it was daylight because they'd look magical at the reception. Jake's mom had made the centerpieces, simple arrangements of wildflowers and mason jars that were somehow more perfect than the over-the-top displays Victoria had insisted on. I stood behind a screen of hedges, peeking out at the gathering guests. Jake's side was packed. His family, his crew, guys he'd played softball with, neighbors from the old neighborhood. My side had exactly 2 people. My grandmother, being wheeled to her seat by a nurse, and I blinked. That couldn't be right. But it was. Marcus Chen sat in the 3rd row, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and a small smile. He caught me looking and gave a little wave. "Who's that?" Maya asked. "Someone from law school. I can't believe he came." "Well, that's 2 people on your side. Better than none."
The music started. Maya walked down first, radiant in the mismatched dress I'd let her pick herself. Then it was my turn. I stepped out from behind the hedges, and every head turned. I saw Jake at the altar, and the look on his face was worth everything. Worth the fights with my parents, worth the nasty texts from Victoria, worth walking this aisle alone. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world, and his eyes were shining with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. I started walking, one step, then another. No father's arm to hold, no mother's tears to wipe away, just me and my decision and the man waiting at the end of the path. Halfway down the aisle, something made me look to the right. There, standing at the edge of the garden where the guests couldn't see, partially hidden by a grove of cherry trees, were 3 figures. My mother in a hat and sunglasses, my father in a suit, and Victoria in what was probably a designer outfit. They'd come. They were actually here, but they were hiding, watching from the shadows like they couldn't quite bring themselves to fully commit to either supporting me or staying away. Our eyes met. My mother's face was unreadable behind her sunglasses. Victoria looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. My father's expression was the worst. Not angry, not sad, just disappointed. Like I was a stock that hadn't performed as expected. I could have stopped. Could have invited them to sit down, given them the chance to save face, extended the olive branch one more time. Instead, I turned my head forward and kept walking. If they wanted to lurk in the shadows like wedding crashers, that was their choice. I had a man to marry. Jake was crying openly now, not caring who saw. When I reached him, he took both my hands and whispered, "You're so beautiful. I'm the luckiest guy alive." The ceremony was short and sweet. We'd written our own vows, ignoring the traditional ones that felt too stiff, too formal. Jake promised to always fix my car when it made weird noises and to never leave the toilet seat up. I promised to watch the Bruins games with him, even though I didn't understand hockey, and to never judge him for eating cereal for dinner. We both promised to choose each other every day, no matter what. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Jake dipped me like we were in an old movie, and everyone cheered. From the corner of my eye, I saw the 3 figures in the trees turn and walk away, disappearing before anyone else noticed they'd been there.
The reception was perfect chaos. Jake's cousin's band was actually pretty good, playing everything from Irish drinking songs to classic rock to ridiculous pop hits that got everyone on the dance floor. His mother cried and hugged me and told me I was the daughter she'd always wanted. His brothers gave embarrassing speeches about Jake's childhood mishaps. Maya and Sophie led a conga line that somehow ended up in the koi pond, which was probably a lawsuit waiting to happen but was hilarious in the moment. My grandmother wheeled herself over during a slow song. "Dance with me, sweetheart." I knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her papery hands in mine. "I'm so glad you came, Nana." "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Her voice was thin but steady. "Your parents are fools. Your mother was always too concerned with what people think, and your father never met a dollar he didn't love more than his own children. But you, Emma, you're brave. You chose love over money, and that's rare." "Did you see them? They were here, watching from the trees." "I saw." She squeezed my hands. "They'll regret this. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday they'll realize what they lost, and it'll be too late. I don't need their regret. I don't need anything from them." "I know. That's why you'll be fine." She pressed something into my palm. A check. I tried to hand it back, but she closed my fingers around it. "For the honeymoon. Go somewhere beautiful, and don't think about those idiots for a single second." I looked at the check. $10,000. "Nana, I can't." "You can and you will. I'm 84 years old and I'm not taking it with me. Besides, your grandfather would have loved Jake. He started as a mechanic, you know, worked his way up. Your mother likes to forget that part of the family history." That night, after the last guest had left and the vendors had packed up and Maya had driven a very drunk Sophie home, Jake and I sat on a bench in the empty garden. The fairy lights were still glowing, and the moon was full, and I'd never felt more at peace. "Did you see your family?" Jake asked quietly. Yeah, they came, but they hid in the trees like cowards, then left before the reception. I'm sorry, Em. Don't be. I leaned my head on his shoulder. This was perfect. Everything I wanted.
Even without them? Especially without them. I sat up, turning to face him. I need to tell you something. My grandmother gave us 10 grand for a honeymoon, and I've been thinking, remember how you always wanted to start your own business, not work for someone else? Jake's eyes widened. Emma, no, that's for our honeymoon. We can do both. Use some for the business, some for a trip. Maybe we go to Ireland, see where your family came from, and when we get back, you start your own plumbing company. Be your own boss. That's crazy. He stopped, seeing my face. You're serious? Dead serious. You're too talented to be making someone else rich. And yeah, it'll be scary and hard, and we might eat ramen for a while, but we'll do it together. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. How did I get so lucky? You proposed to a girl whose family disowned her. Your luck is questionable at best. We both laughed, and the sound echoed through the empty garden. Somewhere in Boston, my parents were probably already in bed, having put the whole embarrassing affair behind them. Victoria was probably texting her friends about how tacky the wedding was. But here, in this moment, I had everything that mattered. 3 days later, we were packing for Ireland when my phone rang. Unknown number, but something made me answer. Emma Ashford? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Speaking. This is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We received a tip about your wedding, that your family, the prominent Ashford family, disowned you for marrying a blue-collar worker. We'd love to do a story on it, a human interest piece about love versus money, that sort of thing. My blood ran cold. I'm sorry, who gave you this tip? I can't reveal sources, but I can tell you we verified some of the details. Your mother is Caroline Ashford, board member of several charities. Your father is Richard Ashford, investment banker. Your sister is Victoria Morrison, married to Bradley Morrison of Morrison Capital Management. All of them declined to attend your wedding. We think it's a compelling story about class divide in modern America. I should have said no, should have hung up and protected my privacy and let my family continue to pretend I didn't exist. But I thought about my mother's face in the shadows, watching but not participating. My father's disappointment, Victoria's cruelty, and I thought about every time they'd made me feel small, every time they'd valued appearances over substance, every time they'd chosen their reputation over their own daughter. When do you want to do the interview? The story aired 2 weeks later, while Jake and I were in Ireland. We almost missed it because of the time difference, but Marcus texted me a link to the video. You're going viral. Thought you should know. I watched it on my phone in our tiny hotel room in Dublin, Jake looking over my shoulder. The interviewer had done her job well, painting a picture of a love story against all odds. They'd filmed B-roll at the botanical gardens, interviewed Jake's mom and brothers, even got a comment from my grandmother calling my parents snobbish fools. And they'd reached out to my parents for comment. My mother's response, delivered through their attorney, was pure Caroline Ashford. The family respects Emma's choices, but prefers to keep private family matters private. Victoria had been less diplomatic. Someone had caught her leaving her gym in Wellesley, and she'd snapped at the reporter. My sister made her bed, now she can lie in it. We tried to help her see reason, but she was determined to throw her life away. The comments on the video were overwhelmingly on our side. Good for her for choosing love. Her family sounds toxic AF. That plumber is hotter than any trust fund baby. Anyone else notice the sister's husband looks miserable? That last comment made me laugh. They'd shown a photo of Victoria and Bradley at some charity event. And yeah, he did look miserable. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and there was a distance between them even though they were standing next to each other. This is insane, Jake said, scrolling through the comments. We're like famous now. Local couple stands up to snooty rich family. It's like a Hallmark movie. My mother is going to lose her mind.
This is exactly the kind of attention she hates. My phone started buzzing. Text after text, call after call, friends I hadn't heard from in years, distant relatives, even some of Victoria's friends who I suspected were just being nosy. I turned it off and tossed it on the bed. "What are you doing?" Jake asked. "We're on our honeymoon. Whatever circus is happening back home can wait." I grabbed his hand. "Come on, let's go get drunk in a pub and embarrass ourselves trying to Irish dance." We did exactly that. And for one perfect night, I didn't think about my family or the news story or any of it. I just danced with my husband and drank terrible beer and laughed until my sides hurt. But when we got back to Boston, reality was waiting. The video had over 2 million views. My Instagram, which I'd barely used, had gained 10,000 followers. Local news stations wanted follow-up interviews. Someone had even started a GoFundMe to help Emma start her new life, which I immediately had taken down because we didn't need charity.
And then there was the message from my mother's lawyer. The family requests that you cease all media appearances and public discussion of private family matters. Continued violation of family privacy may result in legal action. I read that message 3 times, each reading making me angrier than the last. They'd ignored me, disowned me, treated me like I was an embarrassment. And now they wanted to silence me? Not a chance, I muttered. Jake looked up from where he was sketching plans for his new business. "What's up?" "My parents threatened to sue me if I keep doing interviews." "Are you gonna stop?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. The old Emma, the one who'd been raised to avoid scandal and keep family secrets, would have backed down. But that Emma had walked down the aisle alone and lived to tell the tale. The new Emma, she had a different plan. "No," I said slowly, "I'm not going to stop. In fact, I'm going to do them one better." Over the next week, while Jake worked on getting his business licensed and setting up shop, I made calls. I reached out to every media contact I could find, pitched a bigger story, not just about my wedding, but about the entire culture of old money Boston, the suffocating expectations, the way families like mine valued appearance over substance, a deep dive into the world I'd escaped. 3 outlets were interested. I chose the one with the biggest reach, a national morning show that my mother watched religiously. They wanted to do a segment about when family ties break, one woman's journey from old money to true love. They flew us to New York, put us up in a nice hotel, did our makeup and hair. The green room was surreal, like stepping into a parallel universe where my decision to marry Jake made me interesting instead of scandalous. "Are you ready for this?" Jake asked, squeezing my hand as we waited to go on. More than ready. The interview was everything I'd hoped for. The host was warm and engaging, asking about how we met at a coffee shop where Jake was fixing a broken pipe and I was studying for the bar exam. Our wedding, beautiful and intimate and perfectly us. And yes, my family's reaction. I didn't hold back. I talked about the sneering, the threats, the disownment, but I also talked about finding a family in Jake's loud, loving crew, about choosing happiness over approval. "Do you regret your decision?" the host asked.
Not for a second. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. And if your parents are watching right now, what would you say to them? I looked directly into the camera, imagining my mother in her pristine kitchen, coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. I'd say, "Thank you. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. Thank you for pushing me toward the best decision I've ever made. And thank you for teaching me exactly what kind of parent I'll never be." The segment ended with photos from our wedding, Jake and me laughing, dancing, kissing under the fairy lights, my grandmother in her wheelchair, beaming, Jake's mom crying happy tears. It was everything a wedding should be, and my family had missed it all. The show aired on a Thursday morning. By noon, my phone was exploding again. This time, though, the messages were different. Old classmates reaching out to say they admired my courage. Women thanking me for speaking up about family pressure.
Even a few messages from other trust fund kids who'd made similar choices and felt less alone because of my story. And then, buried in the notifications, one message that made my blood run cold. We need to talk. Meet me at the Thinking Cup at 3. Come alone. Victoria. What could my sister possibly want? Was this a trap? A last-ditch effort to get me to shut up and stop embarrassing the family? Or maybe, just maybe, something else entirely. I looked at Jake, who was reading messages on his own phone, grinning at the support pouring in. Whatever Victoria wanted, I'd face it head-on. I'd come this far, I wasn't backing down now. But as I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. My parents had been silent through all of this, content to let their lawyer speak for them. Victoria was unpredictable. And desperate people did desperate things. The coffee shop was crowded when I arrived, full of students and freelancers and the usual Boston crowd. Victoria sat at a corner table, sunglasses on even though we were indoors, her designer bag taking up the chair next to her like she needed to establish a perimeter. She looked thinner than I remembered, and there was something brittle about her, like she might shatter if someone spoke too loudly. "You came," she said when I sat down. "You said we needed to talk. I saw your interview. The whole world saw your interview." She finally took off her sunglasses, and I saw her eyes were red-rimmed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Mom won't leave her house. Dad's business partners are asking questions. I had to resign from the Junior League board because of the whispers." "Good. Maybe now you all know what it feels like to be judged." "This isn't a joke, Emma. You've made us a laughingstock."
"No, you made yourselves that. I just told the truth." I leaned back in my chair. "Is that why you wanted to meet? To guilt-trip me into issuing some kind of apology?" Victoria's jaw tightened. Then, to my complete shock, her face crumpled. "Bradley's leaving me. He's been having an affair with his secretary for 2 years, and now that all this media attention is on our family, he's decided it's the perfect time to file for divorce. He says I'm too high maintenance, too obsessed with appearances, that I'm exactly like Mom." For a moment, I just stared at her. My perfect sister, who'd done everything right, who'd married the right man and had the right kids and lived in the right neighborhood, she was falling apart. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "That's horrible, Vic." "Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't pity me. I can't stand it." She wiped her eyes with a napkin, smearing her mascara. "You were right, okay? At the house, when you said everyone knew about Bradley, I was the idiot who refused to see it. I thought if I just kept up appearances, if I was the perfect wife, he'd stop. But he didn't, and now everyone's going to know I'm a failure too. You're not a failure. He's a cheating asshole. Mom says I should fight it. Hire a shark lawyer, make him pay. Dad's already making calls to his contacts, trying to dig up dirt on Bradley's company. They want to destroy him." She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "They care more about winning than they do about how I feel." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Boston traffic rushed past, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this coffee shop. "Why are you really here?" I asked quietly. Victoria looked at me, and for the first time since we were kids, I saw something real in her eyes. Not judgment or superiority or careful calculation, just pain. "Because you got out. You walked away from all of it, and you're happy. I saw it in those pictures from your wedding. You were genuinely, completely happy. And I can't remember the last time I felt that way." "It's not too late, you know. You can get out too. It's different for you. You were always the brave one. I'm not strong enough to walk away from everything. You are. You just haven't tried yet." She shook her head. "I have the kids to think about. Their school, their friends. I can't uproot them just because I'm miserable. That's what being a parent means." Being a parent means showing them what a healthy relationship looks like, what self-respect looks like. Right now, you're teaching them to stay in situations that make them unhappy because it's easier than fighting for something better. Victoria's hands were shaking as she picked up her coffee cup. I didn't come here for a lecture. Then why did you come?
She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't know, maybe I wanted to see if you'd gloat. If you'd throw my words back in my face about being embarrassed to go to your wedding. Maybe I wanted you to tell me I deserved this for how I treated you. I'm not going to do that. Why not? I would. I know, but I'm not you. I reached across the table, and after a moment, she took my hand. Look, I'm not going to pretend we're suddenly best friends. You've been horrible to me for years, but you're still my sister, and I don't want to see you destroy yourself trying to live up to Mom and Dad's expectations. They're never going to be satisfied, Vic. You could be perfect, and they'd still find something to criticize. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time Mom complimented you without adding a but? When was the last time Dad asked how you were doing instead of how the portfolio was performing? Victoria pulled her hand back, wrapping both arms around herself. You don't understand. You've always been the rebel. I'm the one who had to be perfect, who had to make up for your defiance. Do you know how exhausting that is? So stop. Stop trying to be perfect. Stop living for their approval. And then what? End up alone in a tiny apartment with no safety net? Some of us need security, Emma. Some of us can't just gamble everything on love. It's not gambling when you know what you want. And you don't need as much security as you think. You're a smart woman with a trust fund of your own. Even if Bradley takes half in the divorce, you'll be fine. It's not about the money. Her voice cracked. It's about failing. About everyone knowing I failed. You didn't fail. He did. He's the one who broke vows. He's the one who lied. And anyone who judges you for his actions isn't worth worrying about. She stood up abruptly, grabbing her bag. I should go. The kids will be home from school soon. Vic, wait! She paused, her back to me. If you ever want to talk, really talk, not just snipe at each other, I'm here. I know we're not close, but we could be, if you want. She didn't turn around. I'll think about it. And then she was gone, disappearing into the Boston afternoon. I sat there for a while, nursing my cold coffee, thinking about the look in her eyes. That desperate, trapped look of someone who'd built their entire identity around other people's expectations and was watching it all crumble. When I got home, Jake was on the phone with a potential client, his first one for his new business. I watched him pitch his services, confident and professional, and felt that surge of pride I got whenever I watched him do his thing. He'd already lined up 3 jobs for next week, all from people who'd seen the news coverage and wanted to support the plumber who married up. Everything okay? He asked when he hung up. How'd it go with your sister? Honestly, I'm not sure. She's a mess. Bradley's leaving her. Shit, that sucks. Yeah, I ticked off my shoes and flopped on the couch. She's so trapped in their world, Jake. I could see it in her eyes. She's miserable, but can't imagine any other way to live. Can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. He sat next to me, pulling me against his chest. You can only control your own choices. I know, it's just... I don't know. I guess part of me hoped that once I broke free, it would show her she could too. But she's not ready. Maybe she will be eventually. Give it time. Time was exactly what we needed. Jake's business was growing faster than we'd expected. Within a month, he had more work than he could handle alone and had to hire his first employee, one of the guys from his old crew. Within 3 months, he'd hired 2 more and was looking at office space. The viral wedding story had been better advertising than we could have afforded, and suddenly everyone wanted the plumber who'd won over the rich girl. My own career was taking an unexpected turn, too. A literary agent had reached out wanting to know if I'd consider writing a memoir about growing up in old money Boston and breaking free. At first, I'd laughed it off.
But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had something to say. Not just about my family, but about the entire culture of wealth and appearances and the crushing weight of expectations. I started writing in the mornings before Jake left for work, drinking coffee at our tiny kitchen table that wobbled unless you stuck a matchbook under one leg. The words poured out, childhood memories of silent dinners and charity galas where I was trotted out like a show pony, teenage years of feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of my last name, law school where I'd first started to realize there might be another way to live. And of course, meeting Jake, falling in love, the fight with my family, the wedding that changed everything. 4 months after our wedding, the book proposal was done. The agent shopped it around, and within 2 weeks, we had offers from 3 publishers. Not huge money, nothing like the trust fund I'd walked away from, but enough to make me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could build something of my own. Something that had nothing to do with the Ashford name and everything to do with who I actually was. "You're really doing this," Jake said, reading the contract the publisher had sent over. "You're going to be a published author." If I can finish the actual book, a proposal is easy. 80,000 words is a whole different story. "You'll do it. You're the most determined person I know." He kissed the top of my head. "I'm proud of you, Em." That night, lying in bed in our still too small apartment that we were finally saving up to move out of, I felt something I'd never felt in my parents' mansion. Peace. Real, genuine peace. Not the artificial calm that came from having everything controlled and managed, but the deep satisfaction of building something real with someone I loved. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from an unknown number. I saw the book deal announcement. "Congratulations. I hope you're planning to change the names. V." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Already planning on it. This isn't about hurting anyone. It's about telling the truth." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, I know. That's what scares them. The next few months were a blur of writing and rewriting, Jake's business continuing to expand, slowly upgrading our furniture piece by piece as we could afford it. We weren't rich, not by my family standards, but we were comfortable. And more importantly, we were happy. We had friends over for dinner parties in our still cramped apartment. We took weekend trips to Maine and Vermont.
We talked about the future, maybe buying a house someday, maybe having kids, maybe just continuing to build this life we'd chosen together. And through it all, my family stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no acknowledgement of my existence beyond Victoria's occasional cryptic messages. My grandmother called every week, filling me in on family gossip I mostly didn't care about, but I listened because I loved her and because she was the only one who'd chosen me over the family reputation. "Your mother's been volunteering at the hospital more," Nana told me one Sunday. "I think she's trying to rebuild her image after all the bad press. She chairs 3 committees now. Stays busy so she doesn't have to think." Good for her, I guess. "Don't be bitter, sweetheart. Bitterness will eat you alive." I'm not bitter. I genuinely don't care what she does with her time. Liar. But Nana said it fondly. "You're allowed to still love them, you know? Even when they've hurt you. Feelings aren't rational." I don't love them. Not anymore. You can't love people who'd rather see you miserable and appropriate than happy and true to yourself. If you say so. But late at night, when Jake was asleep and the apartment was quiet, I'd sometimes pull up old photos on my phone. Me and Victoria as kids, before the competition and cruelty. Family vacations where we'd actually laughed together. My father teaching me to ride a bike. My mother braiding my hair before school. Those people felt like strangers now, like actors I'd seen in a movie once. But they'd been real once upon a time, before money and status and expectations had turned them into the cold strangers who'd threatened to sue me for telling my own story. The book was almost done, just the final chapters left, when everything changed again.
I was at my favorite coffee shop, the one where Jake and I had met, working on a particularly difficult scene about my parents' reaction to my engagement. My phone rang. Victoria. We'd been texting sporadically over the months, surface-level stuff mostly, but she hadn't called.
My stomach dropped. Victoria never asked for help. Not from me, not from anyone. What's wrong? Are the kids okay? The kids are fine. They're at school. It's Bradley. Emma, he's been arrested. I nearly dropped my laptop. Arrested? For what? Fraud. Securities fraud. The FBI showed up at his office this morning with a warrant. They're saying he's been running some kind of Ponzi scheme through his hedge fund. Emma, they froze all our accounts. Everything. I can't even access my trust fund because apparently Dad put it in some joint investment vehicle with Bradby's company for tax purposes, and now it's all tied up in the investigation. This was bad. Really bad. Where are you right now? Home. Trying to figure out what the hell to do. The lawyer says it could take months to sort out what money is actually mine versus what's part of Bradley's criminal enterprise. The house might have to be sold to pay back investors. Emma, I'm about to lose everything. For a split second, I felt a flash of vindication. This was the life she'd chosen, the perfect husband and perfect house and perfect portfolio, and it had all been built on lies. But then I heard her breathing, that ragged sound of someone trying not to completely fall apart, and I remembered she was still my sister. I'm coming over. Don't do anything or sign anything until I get there. Mom and Dad won't come. I already called them. Dad said this is exactly what happens when you don't properly vet your spouse's business dealings. Like this is somehow my fault for not conducting due diligence on my own husband. Jesus Christ. Of course he did. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I shoved my laptop in my bag and headed for the door, texting Jake on the way. Victoria emergency. Bradley arrested for fraud. Going to Wellesley. Love you. His response came immediately. Holy shit. Call if you need me. I can move my afternoon appointments. The drive to Victoria's McMansion felt surreal. The last time I'd been here was 3 years ago for Christmas, before Jake, before everything. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, perfectly manicured lawn, expensive cars in the driveway, the kind of place that screamed money and success. Except now, one of those cars would probably be seized by the feds, and the perfect facade was crumbling. Victoria answered the door in yoga pants and a ratty Harvard sweatshirt. No makeup, her hair in a messy bun. I'd never seen her look so human. Thanks for coming, she said, stepping aside to let me in. The inside of the house was chaos. Papers covered every surface of the kitchen island. Legal documents, bank statements, investment portfolios. Victoria's laptop was open to news articles about Bradley's arrest. The headline read, Prominent Boston money manager accused of defrauding investors of $40 million. $40 million, Victoria said, following my gaze. That's how much he allegedly stole. $40 million from people who trusted him. Some of them were his friends, our friends. Emma, I had no idea. I swear to God, I had no idea. I believe you. I sat down at the island, starting to sort through the papers. My law degree was finally coming in handy for something other than reviewing Jake's business contracts. Okay, walk me through everything. When did you first find out? This morning, 6 a.m., FBI agents banging on the door with a search warrant. Bradley wasn't even here. He'd stayed at his office overnight, or so I thought. Turns out he was meeting with his lawyer because he knew this was coming. The feds arrested him at 7. I found out from the news. He didn't warn you? Nothing. Not a word. His lawyer called me an hour ago to tell me Bradley's being arraigned this afternoon and that I should prepare for media attention. Like I'm the criminal here. Like I had anything to do with this. I kept reading through the documents. The more I read, the worse it got. Bradley hadn't just been running a simple Ponzi scheme. He'd been using his investors' money to fund his lifestyle. The house, the cars, the private school tuition, Victoria's shopping habits. Everything they'd built was essentially stolen money. Vic, this is worse than you think. According to these documents,
Your trust fund wasn't just tied up with his company. He used it as collateral for loans he took out to cover shortfalls in the fund. If the prosecutors can prove you knew about any of this, you could be charged as an accessory. Her face went white. But I didn't know. I never looked at the finances. Bradley handled all that. He said it was boring hedge fund stuff, and I wouldn't understand it anyway. Did you ever sign anything? Any documents, any forms, anything related to his business? She thought for a moment, then her face crumpled. Oh, God. The tax returns. I sign joint tax returns every year without reading them. What if there was something in there? We need to get you a lawyer. Not Bradley's lawyer, your own criminal defense attorney. I can't afford that. All my money's frozen. What about Mom and Dad? Victoria laughed, but it was a bitter sound. They made it very clear they're not helping. Dad said I made my bed when I failed to maintain proper oversight of marital assets. Mom said this is what happens when you marry for status instead of character, which is rich coming from her. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling Marcus. Marcus Chen? Why? Because he's a lawyer, he owes me a favor, and he's one of the only people from our old world who isn't a complete asshole. I hit dial before Victoria could protest. Marcus answered on the second ring. Emma Ashford, to what do I owe the pleasure? I need a favor, a big one. My sister's husband just got arrested for securities fraud, and she needs a criminal defense attorney like yesterday. Any chance you know someone who'd take the case?
There was a pause. Victoria, the one who made fun of your wedding? Yeah, that one. But she's still my sister, and she's about to get railroaded for crimes her scumbag husband committed. Give me an hour, I'll make some calls. True to his word, Marcus called back 45 minutes later with the name of a defense attorney who specialized in white-collar crime, Catherine Walsh, apparently one of the best in Boston, and she'd agreed to a consultation that afternoon based on Marcus's recommendation. We met her at her office downtown, a sleek high-rise that made me appreciate our tiny Jamaica Plain apartment even more. Catherine was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no nonsense, and she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a legal pad. And I mean everything. Every document you signed, every conversation about money, every time your husband mentioned his business. I need to know what the prosecutors might know. Victoria talked for 2 hours straight. Catherine took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, her expression giving nothing away. When Victoria finished, Catherine sat back in her chair. Okay, here's the situation. The good news is I don't think you're going to be charged. You clearly had no involvement in the actual fraud, and the paper trail supports that Bradley kept you in the dark about the business. The bad news is you're going to lose everything. The house, the cars, anything purchased with money from the fund. The feds will seize it all to pay back investors. What about my trust fund? Victoria asked. That was my money from my grandparents. Surely they can't take that. Unfortunately, because your father put it in a joint investment vehicle with your husband's fund, it's now considered part of the criminal enterprise. You'll have to prove that money was yours and not proceeds from the fraud. That could take years, and you'll only get back what's left after investors are made whole. If there's anything left. Victoria put her head in her hands. I'm broke. I'm actually broke. I don't even have money for groceries. Catherine's expression softened slightly. Do you have anywhere you can stay? Friends or family who can help temporarily? Victoria looked at me. We both knew what the answer should be, but saying it out loud felt like admitting defeat on every level. She can stay with us, I said, and ignored the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like Jake asking what the hell I was thinking. It's not much, but it's safe, and the feds can't seize it. Emma, you live in a one-bedroom apartment. So you'll sleep on the couch. It's better than reporters camping outside your house in Wellesley. Catherine nodded approvingly. That's smart. The media circus is going to be brutal. I'd recommend lying low until the arraignment. After that, we'll have a better sense of the timeline. She handed Victoria a contract.
My retainer is $50,000. Given your circumstances, I'm willing to defer payment until your trust fund situation is resolved. But Emma, I'll need you to sign as guarantor.
I looked at the number on the page. 50 grand. That was more than Jake and I had in our savings account. That was business expansion money, house down payment money, our entire safety net. Can I have a minute to call my husband? Of course. I stepped into the hallway and dialed Jake. He answered over the sound of running water. Hey babe, what's up? How's Victoria? She's in deep trouble. Her lawyer needs a $50,000 retainer, and I need to sign as guarantor because all of Vic's money is frozen. There was a long pause. $50,000. I know it's a lot. And I know we were saving that money for the business expansion, but Jake, she's got nobody else. Mom and Dad cut her off. If I don't help her, she's going to end up with some public defender who doesn't give a damn. Another pause. I heard him shut off the water, pictured him standing in someone's kitchen, covered in work grime, trying to process what I was asking. This is the same sister who said I probably smell like sewage, right? The one who refused to come to our wedding? Yeah? And you want to risk our entire savings to help her? I do. I know it's crazy, but I can't just abandon her, Jake, not when she's actually asking for help. I heard him sigh. That long, suffering sound he made when I was doing something impulsive, but he loved me anyway. Okay, do it. But Em, if your family screws us over on this, I'm going to be seriously pissed. I love you. You know that, right? I love you so damn much. Yeah, I love you too. Go save your sister. I went back into the office and signed the contract, trying not to think about what $50,000 meant to people like us. Catherine nodded and shook both our hands. I'll start filing paperwork today. Victoria, go pack a bag and get out of that house. The media will be there by evening news, and you don't want to be around for that. We drove back to Wellesley in silence, both of us processing the nuclear bomb that had just detonated in Victoria's life. When we pulled up to the house, there were already 2 news vans parked across the street. Shit, Victoria muttered. They're fast. We'll go in through the garage. Pack quick. Only essentials. Everything else we can come back for later. Inside, the house felt like a mausoleum. Every perfectly decorated room, every expensive piece of furniture, every carefully curated detail that Victoria had obsessed over, it was all evidence now. All of it, bought with stolen money. Victoria moved through the house like a ghost, pulling clothes from her closet, grabbing photos of her kids, her jewelry box. Should I take this? She asked, holding up a diamond necklace. Bradley gave it to me for our anniversary. Is it technically stolen property? Leave it. Take only things that were clearly yours before the marriage or gifts from people other than Bradley. She nodded and put the necklace back. We worked quickly, filling 3 suitcases with clothes, toiletries, important documents. As we were heading back down the stairs, someone knocked on the front door. Hard.
Mrs. Morrison? Channel 7 News. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your husband's arrest. Victoria froze on the stairs, her face pale. Don't answer it, I whispered. Let's go out through the garage. But as we loaded the suitcases into my car, more reporters appeared in the driveway. They swarmed us like locusts, cameras flashing, microphones shoved in our faces. Mrs. Morrison, did you know about the fraud? Are you also under investigation? How do you feel about your husband stealing from your friends? Will you stand by him? Victoria's hands were shaking so badly she dropped her car keys. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward my car. No comment. We have no comment. One reporter, a young guy who couldn't have been more than 25, stepped directly in front of me. Aren't you Emma Ashford, the one who married the plumber? Is this karma for your family? Something snapped inside me. Get the hell out of my way before I move you myself. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. Now move. Jake had taught me a lot of things in our time together, including how to have a backbone when people pushed too hard. The reporter saw something in my face and stepped aside. We got in the car and I peeled out of the driveway, leaving the media circus behind. Victoria was crying silently in the passenger seat, tears streaming down her face. This is my life now.
running from reporters, broke, homeless, living with my little sister who I treated like garbage. You're not homeless, you're staying with family. You hate me. I don't hate you. I'm pissed at you for a lot of things, but I don't hate you. I glanced over at her. Look, we're going to have to set some ground rules. Our apartment is tiny. You're going to have to share space with me and Jake doesn't do drama. You're also going to have to pull your weight. Cooking, cleaning, whatever needs doing. And if you say one word about how small the place is or how our furniture is from IKEA, I'm kicking you out. Are we clear? She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm sorry for everything. For what I said about Jake, about your wedding, for being such a bitch all these years. Apology noted. Now let's get you settled before Jake gets home and realizes what he agreed to. Our apartment had never felt smaller than it did trying to cram Victoria's 3 suitcases into the living room. Jake arrived home at 6, dirty from a day of work, and stopped dead when he saw the suitcases everywhere. Hey, Victoria said quietly. She looked like a scared kid, not the imperious sister who'd mocked my wedding. Thank you for letting me stay. I know you didn't have to. Jake looked at me, then back at Victoria. House rules. You help with chores. You don't touch the thermostat. Heat costs money. You're respectful to both of us. And if reporters show up here, you deal with it, not us. Understood? Understood. Good. He disappeared into the bedroom to shower, and I could hear him muttering under his breath about his good deed for the decade being used up in one day.
That first night was awkward as hell. Victoria slept on our lumpy couch under blankets we'd borrowed from Jake's mom. I could hear her crying softly around midnight, the sound muffled by a pillow. Part of me wanted to go comfort her. The other part remembered every cruel thing she'd ever said to me and stayed in bed. The next morning, Victoria's situation got worse. The news was everywhere. Bradley's arrest was the lead story on every local station, and somehow they'd gotten photos of Victoria and me leaving her house. The headlines were brutal. Fraud wife flees to sister's modest apartment. From McMansion to couch, fall of a Boston socialite. Emma Ashford takes in sister who shamed her wedding. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Every media outlet in Boston wanted an interview. My publisher called, practically salivating at the publicity this would bring to my book. My agent suggested I write an addendum about Victoria's scandal. Everyone wanted a piece of the drama. Turn it down, Victoria said quietly. She was sitting at our kitchen table in an old t-shirt and sweatpants. No makeup, her hair greasy. The interview requests. Turn them down. I know it would be great publicity for your book, but please, I can't handle seeing myself dissected on national TV right now. I looked at her. Really looked at her. This broken woman who'd lost everything was asking me to give up a career opportunity that could make my book a bestseller. The old Victoria would never have given up anything for me. Okay, I said. I'll turn them down. Really? Really. But you owe me big time. She nodded, and for the first time in maybe ever, I saw something like respect in her eyes. The next few weeks fell into a strange routine. Victoria slept on the couch, spent her days meeting with lawyers and trying to untangle her finances, and actually followed the house rules. She cooked dinner twice a week, badly at first because she'd never really learned how, but she tried. She did laundry, cleaned the bathroom, walked to the corner store for groceries because she didn't have a car anymore. Jake was surprisingly patient with her. He didn't bring up her past comments about him, didn't gloat about her fall of grace. He just treated her like a roommate who was going through some stuff. Sometimes I'd come home and find them watching the Bruins game together, Jake explaining hockey rules while Victoria actually paid attention. "Your husband's a good guy," Victoria said one night when Jake was working late. We were sitting on the floor of the living room because the couch was covered in her blankets, sharing a bottle of cheap wine. I was wrong about him. About all of it. Yeah, you were. I spent my whole life trying to be what Mom and Dad wanted. The perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect socialite. And for what?
So I could end up broke and sleeping on my sister's couch while my husband goes to prison? Bradley's not convicted yet.
He will be. Catherine says the evidence is overwhelming. He kept 2 sets of books, Emma, one for investors and one that showed the truth. He knew exactly what he was doing. I poured more wine into her plastic cup. We'd given up on actual wine glasses after Victoria broke 2 of our 4. What are you going to do after all this is over? I don't know. Get a job, I guess? Though I'm not exactly qualified for anything. My degree is in art history, and my only work experience is volunteering for charity boards. You could go back to school, get a teaching certificate or something? She laughed. Can you imagine me teaching? Why not? You're good at organizing things, bossing people around. Teaching's basically that, with educational content thrown in. Victoria looked at me like I'd suggested she become an astronaut. That's insane. So is marrying a plumber, according to you. And look how that turned out. She smiled, a real smile. Fair point. The kids came to visit every weekend. At first, Victoria tried to keep them away, embarrassed by the cramped apartment and the fold-out couch. But they didn't care. 7-year-old Sophie and 5-year-old Max thought it was an adventure. Camping out in Aunt Emma's living room, eating takeout pizza because nobody felt like cooking, watching movies on our TV that was half the size of the one they'd had at home. Why doesn't Daddy come too? Max asked one Sunday afternoon. He was sitting on Jake's lap, watching him explain something about the truck engine using Lego blocks. Victoria's face went tight. Daddy's away for work, sweetie. When's he coming back? Not for a while. Sophie, who was older and smarter, looked at her daughter with those 2 knowing eyes. Is Daddy in trouble? Kids at school say he's a criminal. The pain on Victoria's face was physical. Daddy made some mistakes. He did things he shouldn't have done, but that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Do you still love him? Sophie asked. Victoria looked at her daughter for a long moment. I don't know, baby. Right now, I'm just really angry at him. After the kids left, Victoria cried for 2 hours straight. Not the quiet crying I'd heard that first night, but gut-wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. I held her while she cried, and it felt like we were kids again, before everything got complicated, before money and status and our parents' expectations had turned us into strangers. I hate him, she gasped between sobs. I hate him for what he did to us, to those kids. They're going to grow up knowing their father is a criminal. That's his legacy. They're also going to grow up knowing their mother is strong enough to rebuild from nothing. That's your legacy. She pulled back, wiping her face with the sleeve of her shirt. When did you get so wise? Around the time I realized that family approval wasn't worth sacrificing my happiness. 2 months into Victoria's stay, my book was published. The launch party was supposed to be at a fancy bookstore in Cambridge, wine and cheese and local media. But after everything with Victoria, I downplayed it, not wanting to rub my success in her face while her life was still in shambles. Stay tuned. The next part of this story drops tomorrow. And trust me, you absolutely don't want to miss what happens next. The twist coming is so wild, it might just break the internet. Tomorrow's chapter isn't just a continuation, it's a detonation.